Hi guys, it's Nicole here. Just enjoying and sharing the intersection of two of my favorite things, knitting and books. Today's knitting book review is a book I checked out from the Watertown Free Public Library. Getting Started Knitting by Jennifer Worick. This is a great book for beginners. In my first knitting book review, I got some comments from people that they wanted to have a book that was talking about some of the basics of knitting, and this is a great one. For all of those beginning knitters out there, you'll be interested to know that Jennifer Worick has written a number of books, but she has quite an eclectic background. I take this to mean that those who are interested in knitting can be interested in many other things as well. You can have a wide range of interests, and this book will help you dabble in knitting, figure out a little bit about it, or potentially start on a path towards more advanced knitting if that's what you're interested in. But you don't need any background, and you can have all of the interests that you want as you go into knitting as well. So, what does this book cover? It's broken into 5 sections. Section 1, the yarn, needles, and patterns. Oh my! Taking me back a little bit to Dorothy and Oz. So whether it's in person or online, before you can start knitting, you will need to have some supplies, even if it's just needles and yarn. And you'll need to go to a yarn store or a place that sells yarn to get this. Again, it can be in person or online. But this section of the book does a great job of kind of walking you through what it will look like. What will you see when you go in the store? How are things set up? Who can you ask for help? Some of those kinds of things. So it's, again, a great indicator that this is actually a book for beginners, people who don't know anything about knitting. So you start from picking up your supplies. Section 2, the basics. So your pre-basics, the fundamentals, what do you need, how do you get it, and then the basics. What do you do once you have the stuff? This starts with fundamentals that often get left out, that are sometimes assumed that everybody knows that, which of course, if you've never done it, you don't know. So this starts at the beginning, and they promise in the book that it is written in plain English, meaning they leave out a lot of the acronyms and symbols and those kinds of things for later, they say, or Jennifer Worick says. She starts with like setting up your space. How do you have a space where you can do knitting? What does that look like? How do you do that? And then what do you actually do with those yarns and needles? And she also covers what you need to do with your stash. These white bins, or clear bins, I guess, those are my stash. My yarn is all inside there, protected from light, dust, but who can resist all that squishy yarn? When you go to the yarn store, you see all these beautiful colors and patterns, and at least I know I can never resist leaving with at least something. So how do you take care of it? That's what's covered in the basics. Section 3, the next level. After doing some of those basic projects using your knit and your purl stitch, this one goes over how to combine those in some different ways. How do you increase and decrease so you can make things that are different shapes and sizes? And then also how to do some cabling and knitting in the round. So legitimately next level stuff after you've had a chance to do some basics. Section 4, the garment district. So this isn't even another next level, right? So you can make something that's a rectangle, like a scarf in your basic section, and then you can do something that requires you to get bigger or smaller in your next level section. But if you need something to actually fit, if you need the sweater to go on you or the hat to go around your head, then you're going to need to have some additional information. And this section goes over that. So how do you go from doing things in straight rows to doing things that fit you or someone else, if they are very lucky. Making something to fit somebody else, definitely pass next level. Section 5, the big finish. This section is a great resource. It covers things like how to make pom-poms and fringe, the kinds of stuff that you add after you've finished your project. It also talks about some tools that you may need to make your project unique. You can use a crochet hook to do like a chain addition. Just things that are done after all of the knitting stuff is done. And this is great because it lets you give your project the flair that you want it to have specifically, and it also gives you a chance to do things after, right? So you might have made a basic scarf and then you want to add some fringe, and you can do that. Even towards the beginning of your knitting experience, you can add embellishments and flair, which is very exciting. All of the sections in this book, except the yarn pattern oh my section, is broken. These sections are broken into 2 parts: the information that you need in order to do this stuff, and then projects. So you learn and then you practice, which is really great with knitting. This is a very hands-on skill that you have to actually practice doing in order to really learn it. And my punny self is quite happy with this book. Jennifer Worick adds in some great gems in the book, including things like taking a ribbing and increasing your capabilities. As promised in the book, the text is in plain English, and it's great for beginners and has some fun things, even if you already know how to knit and have practiced these. One thing that I know I want to use is the pocket. So in the increasing and decreasing next level section, she goes over how to make a pocket that you can add onto a scarf or a sweater or a bag. I think that'll be a really cool thing to test out and also to introduce my students to. Okay, tips. This book is full of tips, which I really like. There are sections in the book where there's like big rectangles that have additional information in them. And that's nice to have it like broken out and pulled aside so that you know what you're looking at. They do show a lot of the techniques using computer-generated graphics. So they're like one-dimensional drawings of like hands and knitting needles and yarn. And this is a pretty typical way to show how to do knitting stitches. If you've looked into knitting at all, you may have seen them. Often they're kind of black and white, and then they'll have one part of it that's in color sometimes. It's showing you like that next step. And I will be completely honest, these images are mind-bending to me. I have used them successfully once I already knew how to do something in order to remind myself some part of it. But if I'm learning something new, those images themselves are a little bit challenging for me. So I appreciate that this book like walks you through everything in words and then also uses those kind of to supplement. But just be aware and don't be scared if you can't understand something from that. Watch a couple YouTube videos or get a knitting instructor to help you and you will be great. So they also have a tip that I want to start using where you should keep track of all the needles that you buy. She actually gave a list of a number of ways that you could do this. You could do it in an Excel spreadsheet, in like a sticky note. If you have a knitting journal, you could even write it in there. But just keeping track so that you don't end up buying multiples of the same needles. It's a little thing. You really can keep track any way you want, but it will make a big difference. You'll save money by not having to rebuy or buying a duplicate of something. And if you keep it in some sort of digital format or with your knitting stuff, then when you're at the yarn store getting something new for a new project, you can double check right then. So that's one of the things that I want to create. And our final tip that I wanted to just share is about your tote bag. So I'll just read this quote here. You can use any tote bag to hold your yarn, needles, and patterns, but it is a nice idea to use the bag only for your knitting. Don't be tempted to throw other items in the bag that can snag or stain your project. You put a lot of time and care into your work, so protect it. which is true. This is a really helpful tool. You don't want your keys in there and getting snagged and pulling your yarn out or anything like that. But the last line also really stuck out to me. You can never replace lost or stolen work. It's from page 17 of the book. And this is true. I remember when I was working on this dress that I knit for myself, I remember at one point thinking, if somebody was to try and rob me right now, I would rather them take my wallet and all of my money than this project. I put so much blood, sweat, and tears into it. So have a separate bag, keep track of it, keep your stuff safe. Resources. This book has a little section at the end with these resources in it. The first one, accidents will happen. This is true. This goes over some of the basic common problems that knitters have. Dropping a stitch, accidentally putting your yarn over your needle and creating an extra stitch. This shows you how to recognize these problems and also walks you through how to fix them. The Knitter's Pantry. This may be my favorite thing about this book. It's literally a 2-page spread with pictures of all the things that are typically used by relatively beginning knitters, the things that you'll want to have on hand, visually showing them to you, having their name by them so you can recognize them when you see them, and then be able to get them and use them if you want to. Abbreviations. For the most part, this book avoids them. It doesn't use them. It uses plain English, as they said, but they keep these in here so that you have seen them or can refer back to them if you are coming across these abbreviations in other patterns as you're working on your knitting. And then the glossary. This is really helpful. In addition to having everything written out in plain English, it has one section where if you've forgotten what DK weight stands for, you can look it up. If you need to be reminded what a cable needle is, you can go and look in the glossary. Very, very helpful. All right, favorite quotes. Knitting seems to be everywhere, and you finally decided to get in on the action and join in the fun. After seeing one cute knitted item after another, you've decided, hey, I'm smart, I'm cute, and I want to make cute things for my cute self. I can do that. You're right. You can. All it takes is a bit of moxie, yarn, and a pair of knitting needles. Really, that's all. From page 1. So, call on your inner moxie, get some needles and some yarn, pick up this book, and start knitting. It really is that easy. And you can do it, you cute people, you. Quote number 2. The rush of seeing fabric actually growing off your needles is one of life's simple pleasures. This holds true for knitters and non-knitters alike. Once you are knitting up a storm on planes, trains, and automobiles, strangers of every kind will ask you what you are making. Knitting is seen as a mystery and miracle to non-knitters. This is also true, and if you're thinking about picking up knitting and you're a total beginner, it may be just because of this, because it looked like a miracle or a mystery that you wanted to be a part of. And it really is very fun and very satisfying to see your rows grow and your knitting continue to build as you work on it. Quote 3. Even the most experienced knitter is bound to make a mistake every now and then. The important thing to remember is that most things can be fixed. And if you didn't notice a wrong stitch and you've knitted 12 inches of complicated knitting, think of it as an adorable quirk in your work. Unless it throws off the whole stitch pattern or you're a perfectionist, in which case, by all means, rip out your rows and reknit the stitch properly. I love this reminder. Of course, we're trying to do things correctly and we're trying to follow the pattern, but something will inevitably happen. And most of the time, as Jennifer Worick said, you can fix it. And secondly, if you can't or don't fix it, most of the time, no one else is even going to notice. So don't point it out to them. Just go ahead and enjoy this totally unique thing that you made, or for yourself, or the totally unique gift that you are giving to somebody else. All right, 2 questions to answer. How likely am I to check this book out again? I would check it out again. The one project in particular, like I mentioned, is making that pocket. I really think some of my students would love that, and I want to give it a try before I introduce it to them. And I have a couple of bags or scarves that I think that it would be fun to add the pocket to. Second question, who would I recommend this book to? I recommend this book to anyone interested in learning to knit or interested in learning what it is that knitters are talking about. Even if you don't want to knit, if you have friends who are knitters, this is a great, fun read that you could peruse through and then have some more context and knowledge. You could also check out this book. I would recommend this book to those who are interested in teaching someone how to knit. It's really helpful to have some of these things spelled out, things that some of us will think everyone knows. When Jennifer Worick spells it out, it's a reminder that actually that's a specialized piece of knowledge or term that I know as a knitter, and it will help you connect better with somebody who is just learning to knit for the first time. So that's one of my biggest pieces of praise for this book. Jennifer Worick did a great job of making knitting accessible and understandable to anyone, total non-knitters, or again, that reminder and information for somebody who does know a little bit more already. All right. Now remember, knitting is a fun and relaxing skill, and the library has lots of resources that you can use. This is just one of them that I found in my local library. If you have a favorite that you'd like me to review or check out, or some skill or tool that you want a book review of and information about how you can move forward on that, leave me a comment. If you liked this video, give me a thumbs up. If you want to know when the next one comes out, go ahead and subscribe and turn on notifications so you will know. And of course, happy knitting!